And you know, it remains a very powerful argument. The male body produces sperm that we know biologically are and can be and can become, if united in an ovum, into a potential human being. Without this particular thing, nobody in this room would be here. I certainly wouldn't, and I know all of you wouldn't either. I'm now degenerating into the same kind of repetitive mantra as Bart Simpson's alter ego. So one also would expect that this argument to be held consistently. What I'm trying to do here is think reasonably about this. Well, Protestants who invoke this also defend contraception. In other words, and in fact they're very strongly committed to contraception in many circumstances. Now, to use contraception as a heterosexual is to engage in this natural act and deliberately prevent it from reaching its natural end. So presumably, in that sense, heterosexuals that use contraception are perverting the entire point of sexual interaction. The Protestant argument is, well, yes, but it's also about committing in love to one another. Sex is an act of love in a committed relationship. Well, unfortunately, that argument can also apply, obviously, to gays and lesbian couples. So bye-bye that argument. The Catholics, of course, being sometimes very smart, and in 1968, realizing, if we give this away, a lot of other things will follow, insisted that, no, the contraception is as bad as homosexual sex for exactly the same reason. And again, it's important to point out that Catholic doctrine in this is not bigoted. It is not insofar we've got. It is not saying that homosexual people are evil or wrong. It is saying that the sex act must always be open to procreation. It's the same argument as against masturbation and as against contraception. It's just that homosexuals get caught in this same argument because by nature, sadly, they cannot reproduce themselves. So the question then becomes, is it okay, therefore, for infertile couples, people who know that they cannot procreate at all, to have sex, to engage in a sexual act that is inherently incapable, for no fault of their own, of producing children, right? Here you have a sexual act that they know in advance cannot create children. One would imagine that if sex is only feasible during that, if it is creating new life, then clearly people who are infertile for one reason or another, or people who are postmenopausal, cannot have sex. So one expects the Catholic Church to say, no, you must not have sex past menopause, and you must not have sex if you are infertile, because you are perverting the core nature and reason of sexuality. But they don't, do they? They actually provide the sacrament of marriage to infertile couples. There is no bar on the sacrament of marriage for people who are past menopause. It is also simply a fact that during the period when a woman is pregnant, it is impossible to procreate in the sexual act. And yet the Church does not bar sexual acts in that 9 months, which one might imagine if one is arguing from natural law, from nature. There is nothing more natural than the 9 months of pregnancy in which a woman is not open to conceive again. But no, this position says that's fine. This position also says that in terms of family planning, if you time it right, the rhythm method, as it was once called, natural family planning, if you can time it right so you're at the moment when she can't conceive, then that's okay. Well, if that isn't also trying to rig the system against nature in order to prevent procreation, I don't know what is. This argument is riddled with exceptions. The argument that is used within natural law to say that gay people cannot have sex is violated in the case of many other examples, whether it be the rhythm method, whether it be the infertile couples, or whether it be postmenopausal couples. At which point some say, well, even with infertile couples, as in the Gospels, a miracle can happen. You can still have sex, and a miracle can happen, and somehow God can intervene. Well, if a miracle can happen, then maybe I can have a baby with my husband. Who am I to put a limit on the power of God? You laugh, because the argument is, of course, ridiculous. And once you go through this argument, and as a young Catholic boy trying to understand why my church was telling me I could never have love or a relationship, I had to go through these arguments one by one by one. And I found that every single one fell apart until it came to gay people. They somehow were uniquely set apart because they somehow were not worthy of all the exceptions that were made for other people for compassionate and human and convenient reasons. To answer this argument, because as a young Catholic boy I kept asking unfortunate questions, because it is a church I still love and a faith I still hold, there came this argument, which is that in fact what really matters is that the whole universe by nature is divided into the symbolic two halves of male and female, that this is a mystery about humankind that God has chosen. It is represented by Jesus and the bride of the church. It is represented in the heavens. It is why the Mother of God is given such great prominence within the Catholic tradition along with Jesus. There is some great symbolic notion that the whole universe is made whole by this complementarity of the sexes, and that anything that violates that complementarity somehow misses. So that contracepted or infertile sex, infertile sex between couples who cannot procreate, because they model the form of the male and the female, are allowed, but because a man and a man or a woman and a woman do not represent this natural form of the universe, it is some violation. Now, some of you have puzzled looks on your faces, and I don't blame you. Jesus, one recalls, never married. Jesus, one recalls, told all his disciples to leave their wives immediately without even saying goodbye. Jesus, one recalls, consorted with single women. The church itself demands that its highest people in authority be male and unmarried. This fantastic importance of complementarity of male and female again suddenly collapses, except when it comes to the question of homosexuals, in which case it is resolutely and consistently enforced.